Imagine standing under a rusting steel bridge in a hollowed-out American city. Now look across the globe to the Middle East, where a single American fighter jet burns through $100 million of your tax money. Since the year 2001, the United States government has drained over $8 trillion into endless desert wars. That exact sum of money could have rebuilt every broken public school and entirely eradicated homelessness across America 3 separate times. Instead, it bought precision smart bombs, it generated massive corporate profits, and it funded a terrifying geopolitical reality that Washington refuses to admit out loud. The United States is absolutely not fighting to protect a loyal ally. The American empire is blindly bleeding its own wealth to build its own replacement. Every great superpower, from Rome to Britain, arrogantly believed its reign would last forever. They were all violently wrong. What is unfolding right now in the Middle East is a 3,000-year-old trap snapping shut. Ask yourself a brutally simple question. If Israel is truly America's closest partner, why does the United States grow fundamentally weaker, more divided, and more politically exhausted every single year it spends defending them? While the American working class struggles to survive the burden of inflation, the nation they protect has grown technologically untouchable and regionally dominant. This is not a military alliance. This is a masterclass in imperial manipulation, and the American taxpayer is the only one footing the devastating bill. There is a fatal psychological disease that infects every aging empire. As an imperial power grows incredibly wealthy and highly comfortable, it fundamentally loses its appetite for the brutal realities of war. It does not want blood on its hands. It desperately wants to look civilized, democratic, and clean. So the political establishment makes a lethal strategic decision. It hires someone else to do the hard work. It outsources its violence to a forward force, a proxy, a mercenary. This is a ruthless pattern that human history repeats without fail. The mercenary always replaces the empire. Thousands of years ago, the Romans started as mercenaries for the Etruscans in northern Italy. They fought the Etruscan wars and took the Etruscan losses. And then one day, the Romans looked at their soft, comfortable, dependent employers and made a calculated decision. They asked why they were serving these people. Rome became the empire, and the Etruscans disappeared from history. Centuries later, the Mongols served as border guards and fighters for the Chinese dynasties. They protected the massive frontier and absorbed the severe punishment. Then, Genghis Khan looked at the wealth and weakness of China and asked the exact same question. The Mongols conquered China. The mercenary always becomes the master. Now pull your eyes away from the ancient history books and look directly at the modern Middle East. Ask yourself what Israel has actually been doing for the last 75 years. They have been fighting America's wars, taking the fierce criticism and absorbing the relentless international condemnation. They have operated as the ultimate forward force so Washington could safely keep its hands clean. Israel has been America's mercenary. But right now, a terrifying structural transition is taking place. The proxy is finally waking up. Israel is looking directly at a deeply divided, financially exhausted American empire and asking the exact same question the Romans asked, the exact same question the Mongols asked. Why are we still the servant? The mercenary shift has officially begun, and the masters in Washington are entirely blind to the coup happening right under their feet. To truly understand why the mercenary is actively replacing the master, you must understand how real global power actually functions. At the visible base of the system is the empire, the military muscle that enforces the rules and protects the flow of resources. But above that military muscle sits global finance, Wall Street, the international banks, and the global institutions. These entities do not hold rifles, but they write the ruthless rules of the economic game. Here is the critical reality that Washington ignores. The people who run this global financial system do not care about patriotism, and they do not care about nations. They only care about the system continuing. They demand stability. They require a highly reliable enforcer to protect their investments. For 80 years, that ultimate enforcer has been the United States. But today, the financial elite are watching the American muscle completely collapse. You can measure the death of an empire through 3 brutal tests: unity, capacity, and determination. The United States is currently failing all 3. Test 1 is unity. An empire absolutely cannot project global power when its own citizens despise the mission. Recent polling shows only 40% of Americans actually support direct military action against Iran. That is not a unified superpower. That is a fractured, financially exhausted society being violently steered by a foreign policy its own population never voted for. Yes. Test 2 is capacity. America currently spends 41% of all global military spending, more than the next 10 countries combined. Yet, look at the terrifying battlefield reality. A $13 billion American aircraft carrier recently had to withdraw from active operations because it was entirely too exposed to cheap missiles. The F-35 stealth fighter, a machine costing $100 million per unit that took 26 agonizing years to develop, is consistently paralyzed by basic Iranian drone swarms. The American defense budget has been eaten alive by contractor corruption, while actual battlefield dominance crumbles. Test 3 is determination. During World War II, thousands of American Marines violently died taking the single volcanic island of Iwo Jima, and the nation accepted that massive cost because the mission was crystal clear. Today, the Pentagon is absolutely terrified to report a single soldier's death to the American press. Washington is desperately trying to fight a mountainous, heavily armed nation of 90 million people while praying for a clean, fast, television-friendly victory. That is not imperial determination. That is a hollow country that no longer believes in what it is fighting for. While the American empire fundamentally fails every single test of global power, look at the nation standing directly beside it. If you apply those exact same 3 tests to Israel, you witness the terrifying resume of an imperial replacement. Test 1 is unity. Over the past year, the entire international community, from the United Nations to allied foreign governments, aggressively condemned Israeli military actions across the region. The pressure was historically unprecedented, but a staggering 82% of Israeli citizens proudly supported their military operations, and 66% believed they were fighting for the absolute survival of their nation. That is not fragile political support that changes with a daily news cycle. That is unbreakable national will. When the global pressure reached its absolute peak, the Israeli government did not fall. The public opinion did not break. They simply continued. Test 2 is capacity. Forget the bloated, corrupt defense contracts of Washington and look at what true operational capacity actually looks like. In 2024, Israeli intelligence executed what military analysts are calling one of the most sophisticated and devastating covert operations in modern human history. They spent years, possibly decades, meticulously embedding highly advanced explosives directly into the communication devices used by Hezbollah operatives across Lebanon. The entire operation cost an estimated $275 million. In a single, ruthlessly coordinated strike, they completely shattered the command and communication backbone of one of Iran's most powerful regional proxy forces. No other military superpower on Earth, including the United States, has demonstrated that terrifying level of intelligence precision in recent years. Test 3 is determination. Whatever your personal view is on the morality of their military campaigns, the strategic reality on the geopolitical board is completely undeniable. This is a country that absolutely will not stop. They are not fighting for television ratings or domestic political polling numbers. They possess a fierce existential determination that the modern American military entirely lacks. Israel flawlessly passes all 3 tests of imperial power, while the United States miserably fails all 3. The mercenary is completely ready for the promotion, but to secure that promotion, the proxy needs the master to get out of the way. And that brings us to the darkest secret of the modern Middle East. The current war is not about defeating terrorism, it is a carefully laid trap. Here is the part of the geopolitical reality that absolutely no Western news channel will dare to say out loud. The current war against Iran is not primarily about stopping nuclear weapons. It is not about fighting terrorism. It is not even fundamentally about Israeli security in the short term. The war against Iran is a calculated mechanism, whether by deliberate design or by natural consequence, specifically engineered to exhaust the American empire. It is a brutal strategy designed to clear the ground entirely for Israeli regional dominance. Look at the map. Who currently controls the Middle East? It is not Israel, it is the United States. Massive American military bases currently sit in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Iraq. American naval forces entirely control the vital oil shipping lanes. American diplomatic power shapes absolutely every major deal in the region. Now, you must study the Greater Israel concept. This is an idea deeply rooted in certain interpretations of biblical texts, stating that Jewish sovereignty rightfully extends all the way from the Nile River to the Euphrates. Under that specific ideological framework, the massive American military presence in the Middle East is absolutely not viewed as protection. It is viewed as an occupation of the very land under discussion. Therefore, the strategic playbook, whether conscious or unconscious, is brilliantly straightforward. You aggressively pull the United States into an incredibly long, astronomically expensive, and entirely unwinnable conflict with Iran. You force the American empire to blindly spend trillions of dollars. You force the American military to massively overextend its reach. You meticulously make the American public so thoroughly exhausted, so fiercely angry, and so completely divided that the political establishment in Washington has absolutely no choice but to order a full withdrawal. The trap is perfectly designed. When the exhausted American military finally pulls back its forces and abandons its bases, a massive power vacuum is instantly created. And you already know exactly who is patiently waiting to fill that space. While the Pentagon relentlessly drops millions of dollars worth of munitions onto the Iranian desert, a terrifying economic paradox is quietly unfolding entirely out of sight. The American public is repeatedly told that maximum military pressure is successfully suffocating the regime in Tehran. But if you look directly at the global financial ledgers, you will witness a completely different, highly embarrassing reality. The United States is inadvertently making its adversary fundamentally richer. The mechanism behind this catastrophic policy failure is incredibly simple. While Washington publicly threatened fire and fury, the political establishment privately panicked over the terrifying prospect of a global oil price spike. To aggressively prevent domestic inflation and an economic disaster at home, they quietly looked the other way and allowed Iranian oil to heavily flow right back into international markets. The consequences were immediate and absolutely devastating to American strategic goals. In a very short window of time, Iran quietly generated an estimated $14 billion in additional, untraceable oil revenue. To understand exactly how massive that geopolitical failure is, you must realize that Iran's entire annual military budget is approximately $10 billion. Through pure strategic incompetence, the American empire practically handed its adversary significantly more money than that adversary spends on its entire armed forces in a full calendar year. But the nightmare for Washington goes much deeper than simple cash. Iran has brilliantly utilized this exact time frame to permanently lock itself into two massive, non-Western global trade corridors. They firmly anchored themselves into the North-South Transport Corridor, a vital economic route securely connecting Russia directly to India and the Arabian Sea. Simultaneously, they deeply embedded themselves into the massive Belt and Road Initiative orchestrated by Beijing. For China to reach European markets efficiently, and for Russia to permanently bypass Western sanctions, the physical geography of Iran is absolutely impossible to route around. This creates a chilling geopolitical reality that American military planners simply refuse to accept, even if the United States somehow magically achieves all of its tactical military objectives in the desert. Iran ultimately wins the long-term economic war. They will emerge from this sprawling conflict significantly more connected, vastly more wealthy, and deeply embedded in a global trade network that Washington absolutely cannot touch. The United States is hopelessly caught in an economic trap of its own making, where every single military escalation actively strengthens the exact country it is desperately trying to destroy. When the dust finally settles and the exhausted American military officially withdraws its physical presence from the Middle East, the region will absolutely not collapse into unmanageable chaos. Nature violently despises a vacuum, and global empires are never simply erased. They are systematically replaced. We are currently witnessing the quiet, highly deliberate construction of a brand new regional order. Just as the ancient world once lived under the Roman peace and the 20th century operated entirely under the American peace, the geopolitical board is actively preparing for Pax Judea. This new imperial architecture is not based on ideology, it is being meticulously built on incredibly solid physical pillars. The first critical pillar is the absolute control of global trade routes. Look directly at the map without American bias. Israel sits exactly at the critical geographic intersection of three massive continents: Africa, Asia, and Europe. It possesses highly strategic, heavily defended coastlines on both the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. No other single country in the entire region holds that unique, commanding geographic position. As the global economy aggressively reorganizes, the highly anticipated India-Middle East-Europe trade corridor is currently being engineered to run directly through Israeli territory as its absolute center point. Whoever physically controls the beating center of that specific corridor permanently controls the most important new trade artery of the 21st century. The second pillar of this emerging empire is energy. The Middle East currently holds approximately 20% of the proven oil reserves for the entire world. It contains some of the largest, most lucrative natural gas fields on the planet, alongside the absolute most critical maritime choke points in all of global shipping. For 80 years, massive American naval destroyers aggressively guarded those specific physical assets. But as the American military presence inevitably retreats, driven by financial exhaustion and domestic political collapse, Israeli strategic positioning is aimed directly at filling that exact void. Through advanced military intelligence and aggressive diplomatic reach, they are moving to actively influence and dictate the flow of regional energy. They are not patiently waiting for Washington to grant them permission to lead. They are actively laying the physical bricks to rule a post-American Middle East. While physical trade routes and massive energy reserves are the highly visible foundation of this new regional order, the ultimate weapon of the 21st century is completely invisible. The third and most terrifying pillar of Pax Judea is the absolute control of data. Currently, Israel possesses more data centers operating in the Middle East than any other country in the entire region. It boasts world-class technology universities, a deeply rooted intelligence infrastructure, and the absolute most advanced artificial intelligence development programs in the hemisphere. In the modern geopolitical theater, raw data is ultimate power, and digital surveillance is absolute control. Whoever successfully builds and actively runs the artificial intelligence backbone of the Middle East will permanently shape exactly how its sprawling populations are governed, monitored, and managed. Right now, Israel stands as the only regional player currently positioned to execute that massive digital vision at scale. If you doubt the immense power of this invisible architecture, look directly at recent history. Consider the terrifying intelligence dominance displayed during the absolute peak years of ISIS attacks. That brutal terror network launched massive, highly coordinated strikes across Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. Yet, one single country, situated directly in that deeply hostile neighborhood with a significant Muslim population, never suffered a major ISIS strike. That country was Israel. Intelligence analysts globally have written extensively about this exact chilling anomaly. The most commonly offered explanation is an astonishing level of operational intelligence that absolutely no other regional power can ever hope to match. Regardless of how you interpret the specifics of that era, the underlying strategic fact holds permanently true. Israel's highly advanced, technologically superior intelligence infrastructure has absolutely no regional competitor. This is the true nature of Pax Judea. It is not a loud political declaration. It is not a triumphant public announcement broadcasted on cable news. It is a quiet, ruthless structural transition of global power that most of the world will not even recognize until the invisible takeover is already complete. Here is the absolute darkest reality of this entire geopolitical transition, and it should make every single American citizen deeply uncomfortable. Right now, young American men and women, drawn from working-class cities and small towns across the country, are actively deployed across the Middle East. Some of those soldiers will never come home. Those who do survive will carry devastating physical and psychological wounds for the rest of their natural lives. And what exactly are those soldiers returning to? They are returning to American cities with crumbling water systems and critically underfunded schools. They are returning to hollowed-out communities completely devastated by the opioid crisis, to aging bridges that structural engineers have officially flagged as dangerously unstable, and to rural counties that can no longer afford to keep their local hospitals open. The astronomical wealth that could easily fix every single one of those domestic tragedies is currently being spent on bombs, and the primary beneficiary of those bombs is absolutely not the United States. The journalist Julian Assange once argued that the fundamental purpose of modern American wars is not to achieve a definitive victory. The true purpose is to deliberately sustain an endless conflict so that military-industrial wealth flows continuously into the hands of a transnational elite. There is massive, observable evidence for that terrifying conclusion, but there is an even deeper, much more destructive layer to this game. These endless wars are not just quietly transferring domestic wealth away from ordinary Americans. They are actively consuming the vital energy, the massive resources, and the irreplaceable political credibility of the American empire itself. Washington is blindly converting the absolute last remnants of its global strength into the physical foundations of a completely different empire. The United States is literally spending its own future just to build someone else's present. For decades, the American people have been relentlessly told that these endless wars were about national security, about stopping nuclear weapons, and about protecting democracy. They have been lied to, and they have never been told the real cost. The global system requires a powerful military empire to function, and the United States can no longer fill that role reliably. The mercenary shift is almost complete. If this kind of raw, unapologetic analysis is exactly what you are looking for to understand the real story hiding behind the mainstream headlines, subscribe to this channel right now. Leave a comment below with your answer to one simple question. Do you think the American public knows their empire is actively being replaced, or has the final decision already been made entirely without them?